Good morning.
Morning.
It is precisely 8:30, so we shall begin.
Morning, everyone.
Hello, Michael.
Morning, everyone. Okay, so we're up to all these people who didn't want to teach, what their special skills. So we're up to Ben Kamtsar, and I'm just going to put up the Yoma here. So where we are is we are on 38, I believe 38b. A bit slow this morning, as often happens. So we talked about the people who made the lechem aponim, the showbread. We talked about the people who made the ketores, and now we come to the story with the writing, which seems to be less of an issue. I'm just having some trouble here. Getting it up. I don't know why. There we are. Talmud, Yoma, 38b. Oh no, it's still 38a. Sorry, 138a. Okay, Omer Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So one more point about the people who made the ketores. Omer Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said as follows. Oh, great! Thank you, Nicole. We have the link now. So he said, "Pam echos b'tzasi zokein echad." I found an elder of the house of Tinas, for the experts in making the ketores. Umegilat samamonin biyado, and a scroll with the precise species and measurements for it in his hand. Amartilo, I told him, may ayin Me'ayin ata omerli. From who are you from? From where are you? He told me, Beis Avtinas. And what is this in your hand? He says, it is a Megillah, a scroll of the Samamonim. Hareoli. So Rabbi Yochanan said, show it to me. Omerli kolzman shebeis abba hayukayamim. As long as people of my father's house were alive, they didn't hand the scroll to anyone. V'achshav, and now apparently he was the only one alive and he had no descendants. Hareu lecha, this is yours and keep it. And be very careful not to reveal the secret of the incense to anyone. And when I came and I told this to Rabbi Akiva, Omerli, he told me, Me'ata, from here on in, Osir l'saper b'gnusan shleilu. We cannot speak against the house of Avtinas, because even though they made money out of it, it's clear their primary concern was the glory of Hashem and the security of the secret of the Ketores, that no idol worshippers be able to use it. Mikan, from this story, with all the temple craftsmen, the sages removed and were forced to return. So Ben Azai says, B'shimcha yikarucha, uv'mkomcha yishavucha. By your name they shall call you, and in your place they shall seat you. U'mashacha yitnulu, and they give you your own. In other words, everyone has a livelihood exactly what God's given them. And ein adam nogea b'mucha m'chavera. No person can touch what God prepares for another person. And no reign can take, and no kingship touches its fellow, even as a hairbreadth. Only when David dies, the Shlomo rule, and so on. And the key point over here is that if you're meant to have something, you'll have it. And if you're not meant to have it, you won't have it. And we don't, even though we think we make all kinds of efforts to make a living, no one has a penny more than God gives them, or a penny less than God gives them. Hugras ben Levi. Who was Hugras, the son of Levi? What did he know about music? Tanya Kashahayanos and Kolo ben Ima. When he would lift his voice in sweet song, Machnis Gudlo Betzoch Piv, he would place his thumb in his mouth and his finger, his pointer, between the strings, until his brothers, the Kohanim, Nizrakim Bavas Rosh Lachareim, their heads snapped back. In other words, it was so beautiful that no matter how many times they heard it, they were shocked. So he was able to do something with the strings of the harp and with his voice that made it particularly beautiful. And he never taught anyone else how to do that.
Bad idea.
What's a bad idea?
That he never taught anybody else.
Yeah, that's why the Gemara, that's why the Talmud complains about it.
Should always teach,
And that's
especially good things.
that is exactly the Gemara's point. Tonu Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa, Ben Kamtsar, L'Rotza L'Lamid Al Ma'aseh Aksav. He didn't want to teach his writing trick. Amralav Sheinotel Arba Kulwasim Ben Etzbosav. He took 4 quills between his fingers, and if there was a word of 4 letters, you could write it at once. He was able to wiggle his fingers in such a way to write 4 Hebrew letters at once.
Oh my God.
Why didn't you teach other people? Because Kula Matzah Tshuva, everyone came up with an excuse. Kamsar lo Matzah Tshuva l'dvarav. Kamsar didn't have an excuse. He was just selfish. Zala Rishainam, about all the earlier ones who had an excuse, we say, let the righteous be remembered for a blessing. Kamsar and his friends. People who have skills who don't teach it just because they want to be special. It says, B'shem Mishayim Yirkov, let the name of the wicked rot. In other words, if you have a good reason not to reveal some hidden skill, tell us the reason. But if you don't have a good reason, don't be selfish. Don't let it die with you.
But this one is different from the previous one. This one, I think he did a good thing not teaching anybody, because writing 4 letters at the same time, I can't think of too many students that would be able to master it.
Yeah, but maybe there would have been some.
Nah, it wouldn't be good.
What if a word had 5 letters? Then what to do?
No, then you can only write 4 letters at a time, and then. But I guess before photocopying, this was convenient.
Yeah.
Or they had carbon paper. Okay, and everything had to be copied over. Right? The people who made their living copying things, like Bartleby the Scrivener. Okay. Now, my v'shem r'shayim yirko. When we say that let the wicked's memory rot, what does that mean? In other words, it sounds cool, but what does it really mean? Because the Talmud is highly selective about its language. Omer Rabbi Elazar, Rakvivos Talib Bishmos, and let their names rot away, like wood rots away. Delo Maskinam B'Shemayim, but we don't call children by their names. So, in other words, you shouldn't call your kids Ben Kamtsar because we don't want their names to be remembered. So, for example, there are not a lot of Jewish Avshaloms around. There's not though in Israel, Joe may remember this. In Israel, there was a Canaanite movement among like the Shomer HaTzair, the very anti-religious left-wing kibbutzniks, that they adopted to name their kids Nimrod and Esav and Achav and Izebel. They named their kids after all the bad people in the Tanakh.
The 50s.
Yeah. So I knew a guy in the 80s, someone in his 40s. In the 80s, I knew this guy. We put tefillin on with him every week. He was a very nice fellow, but his name was Nimrod. He was an Israeli banker at Bank Leumi in Miami Beach. And his name was Nimrod. Nice fellow.
I used to wear the sandals, Nimrod.
Yeah. Okay. Massive Ravina. Ravina, now Masiv is a challenge. Even in Aggadot, the Gemara challenges. So Masiv Ravina has to challenge about not calling people by the names of the wicked. Masiv Doeg ben Yosef. There was a man named Doeg ben Yosef. Shenichu Ovid, whose father died, Ben Katan L'imo, and he was a little boy with it, like his mother. In other words, he was left with his mother as a little boy. And and every day his mother would measure him how much he grew, and give the distance of how much he grew in gold to the Beis Hamikdash, to the temple. But when the Romans overpowered, even though she loved him so much, she was so hungry, she slaughtered him and ate him, which happened during the time of the siege of Jerusalem. Even though it happened in the Second Temple period, Yirmiyahu mourned him. Shall the women eat their children, the children in their care? So the Gemara says the children of who they measured in handbreadths and gave to the temple. So Meshiva Ruach HaKodesh V'omeres. So the Holy Spirit answers Yirmiyahu. In Yehorig Migdash Hashem Kohen V'Navi. If you shall destroy in the Beis Hamikdash the Kohen and Navi, because they murdered Zechariah the prophet in the temple. And terrible punishment came upon the Jewish people because of this.
I never heard of anything like it. The mothers were killing the children and eating them?
Yeah. It happened
Rabbi.
at the time of the Second Temple. The Gemara discussed
They
it.
didn't have to kill them. There were plenty of dead bodies.
Well, I guess there weren't enough dead bodies. I'm going to argue with you. You can argue. The Talmud tells us this happened.
Right.
And, and cannibalism happens. It happened in Siberia during the Great Hungers, and in Ukraine in the Great Hungers of the 1920s. It happened.
Cannibalism doesn't necessarily mean you kill a live person.
Well, and in Leningrad during the Great Famine, people were kidnapping children and killing them and selling their meat in markets, okay? Very, very bad things have happened. And this is one of those cases. Joe, There's nothing to argue. The Talmud tells us this happened. The Talmud is people whose grandparents were there at the time of the destruction of the temple. Sometimes you argue about things. There's nothing to argue. The Talmud tells us it happened. Okay, now, terrible things have happened in history. But the question is that she named him Doeg, and Doeg was a bad person, right? He caused the death of all the priests of Nov when he slandered them to Saul for that they helped David. Says the Gemara, Chazim Masalik Bey. Look what happened to the poor kid. In other words, it wasn't a good idea to call him Doeg. It was a bad omen.
Well,
Omer Rebbe Lazar said, Tzaddik me'atzmo, very interesting statement. A tzaddik is praised for his own actions, for Rasha Makavero, but a wicked person is cursed both for what he did and what his fellow did. Tzaddik me'atzmo, the tzaddik is blessed for himself. The tziv zecher tzaddik livracha. Remember the righteous for a blessing. For Rasha Makavero, but a Rasha is mentioned for his fellow, as it says, V'shem Rishayim Yirkov, the name of the wicked shall rot. In other words, it's in the plural. So one of the explanations for this is that wickedness spreads more easy than righteousness. Bad examples and bad behavior. Why? Why? It's simply, why do people do bad things? Because it benefits them. So, whereas righteousness involves altruism. When a righteous person by definition does things that does not benefit him, either they benefit God and he has to sacrifice to them for God, or they benefit other people. You sacrifice for other people. So sacrifice is far less contagious than greed and advantage. Therefore, wickedness is more contagious than righteousness, because wickedness is like water flowing down to the lowest common denominator.
we say it every morning. Right.
And therefore, when we mention a righteous person, we mention his deeds. We mention a wicked person, we mention his fellows too. We say the name of the wicked people, plural, shall rot. One second. One moment, please. Okay, continue. So, just to shut something off. Okay. Okay. So how do we know now this idea? So this idea of Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, that when we mention the righteous, we should bless them. Where do we see this? So we derive it from the Torah, because if you remember, when God is about to destroy Sodom, Hashem says, "Shall I hide from Abram that which I am doing?" And then right afterwards, it says, "Abram shall become a great and mighty nation," even though there's no clear connection to the previous verse. So when you mention a righteous person, you give him a blessing. Okay. So now we're going to say that even though wickedness spreads more, sometimes wicked people righteous people don't learn from the wicked. And sometimes a wicked person can live around a lot of righteous people and doesn't learn from them. So I'm a Rebbe Lazar said, Tzaddik Dar ben Meish, there was a righteous man who lived with two wicked people and didn't learn from their deeds. Rasha Dar ben Shnei Tzaddikim, there was a wicked person who lived with two righteous people and didn't learn from their deeds. Tzaddik Dar ben Shnei Rasham v'lo Mohamed Masei Ovadia, a righteous man who lived between the two wicked people. Who was this Ovadia? Now, who was Ovadia? Ovadia was a prophet. So during the reign of the wicked Achav and Izevel, who slaughtered the prophets of Hashem and made the worship of the Baal and Asherah through the 10 northern tribes common, about the 9th century BCE. So the ones that Eliyahu contended with. So Avadia worked for them. He ran their kitchen. And even though Avadia was a minister to Izebel and Achav, two bad people, he was righteous and he hid and fed the prophets of Hashem. And now it's a very interesting thing that Avadia would bring food from the king's kitchen to feed the hidden prophets. So from this we see that even though Achav and Izebel were idol worshippers, they still had a kosher kitchen. Rasha Darbein Shnei Tzadikim. A wicked person who lives between two righteous people, and didn't learn from their deeds. Esav lived with Yitzchak and Rivka, but nevertheless, he didn't learn from their deeds and insisted on being wicked. Now we have a very interesting statement. Rabbi Chia ba'Abba Rabbi Yochanan. Chia ba'Abba Sanei Rabbi Yochanan. Ein tzaddik nifter min ha'olam. No righteous people dies ad shenivra tzaddik kemoso, until there's another righteous person to replace it. Shenam, as it says in the book of Kohelet of Ecclesiastes, v'zorach hashemesh uvo hashemesh. The sun shines and then the sun sets. What does that mean? That before Eli's sun set, Eli, the high priest, was the judge of the Jewish people. By the time he died, Samuel was already a prophet. Now, very famous statement. Omer Rabbi Chia ba'Abba, Omer Rabbi Yochanan. Chia ba'Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ra Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty saw Shatstikim Mu'atim, that righteous people are very rare. Amadu Shasolam B'Chol Dor V'Dor. He placed them in every generation. Shenem, as it says, Ki LaHashem Mitzukei Eretz. For God, the pillars of the world, but this is Hannah's song at the beginning of Shmuel. The pillars of the world belongs to Hashem, and he built the heaven upon them. In other words, that God makes sure that there's always righteous people in the world. So he scattered them through the generation. Now this actually raises a very interesting question. Because later in Yoma, in this same tractate, we say that who is a righteous person? Someone with more good deeds than sins. Now, someone with more good deeds than sins is not rare. There are probably billions of such people. And among the Jewish people, most Jewish people probably have more good deeds than sins. So how can you say the righteous are very few? So the answer is that there's two kinds of tzaddiks discussed in the Tanya. But it's really based on a statement in the Eitz Chaim and the Zohar. So the Kabbalists say that there's two kinds of tzaddik. One kind of tzaddik is someone who comes as the end of his life or her life, or Yom Kippur, they're judged and found righteous because they have more good than evil. But there's another kind of tzaddik. And that tzaddik means someone who's totally righteous, who commits no sins. He has no, and more than that, doesn't even desire to sin anymore. A tzaddik is someone who has completely eradicated their evil inclination. Not only do they not sin, they don't want to sin. They've turned themselves entirely into good. Such people are very, very rare. So Hashem made sure to put a few in each generation. As a matter of fact, Rabbi Abba said, "B'shvil tzaddik echad ha'olam mitkayim." That even if there's only one true tzaddik in a generation, that's enough for the world to be maintained. Shenemar, as it says, "Tzaddik yisod olam," and the righteous person is the foundation of the world, and in the singular. Rabbi Chia Didei Omar, Chia himself says, "Me'ochel from here." Raglei Chasid of Yishmor, that God guards the feet of his pious ones. Again, the song of Chana. So that seems to mean a few. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Chasido Ksiv, that it's written without a yud. So it's even though we pronounce it many, it's written as one. And I want to see if that's really the case in our book. I think it is. I've done this of Torah a few times. Let's take a look right up here in the book of Shmuel. Yes, correct. It is written Chasidav without, as if it was says Chasido, his. It's written in the singular, though we pronounce it in the plural. And this indicates that even if there's one righteous man or woman in the world, that is sufficient to support the world. And the idea is that the merit of someone who is truly righteous is as if it were, that merit benefits all of existence. So now we are going to say that that even though it's easier to sin, when it comes to God's assistance, God helps us out to do good and doesn't help us out to do evil. Omer Reish Lakish, it's very beautiful, this little piece. What is the reading? If l'leitzim hu yolitz, if those who want to be scornful, hu yolitz, he lets them be scornful. Ulanovim yitein chen, but to the righteous he gives grace. Bolatame poskin though. If you want to come and be impure, if you want to do bad things, God opens the door. He gives you free will. You want to walk through the door, walk through it. God doesn't stop you from doing evil. But Balatayir, if you come to purify yourself, you come to do good, Messiah knows so, we help you. God gives you a push. When you come to do the right thing, God helps you. Now, what does this mean? So the idea is, again, that because evil benefits our selfishness, our greed, our desires, basically the world of the body we live in, so we don't need any extra help to sin. But to do good, which is always altruistic, it always involves giving of yourself to Hashem or another human being, so that you need a little push because it goes against the inertia and the selfishness of our physical being. And therefore, you need a push. Hashem gives you a push so that you can attain that altruism. Rabbi Yishmael, the students of Rabbi Yishmael gave a parable to this. There was a person who said both naphtha, which is a petroleum product, which was used for lamps and smells bad, v'afarsimon, and balsam, or spearmint oil that smells very nice. Bolim the neft, armalo medodata. When someone comes to buy a jug of naphtha, we tell him, hey, fill it yourself. I don't want to get near this stuff. Bolim do the farsimon, but if he's weighing out balsam, he says, wait for me till I pour out for you. Because that way we'll both benefit. As I pour it out, the good smell will stick to my hands. So too Hashem says, look, I got to give people free will. You want to sin, you want to stink, go stink. I let you, because I have to give you free will. But you want to come close to me, says Hashem, I like that. The free will only exists to make the good meaningful. Why does the ability to do evil exist? To make the good meaningful, to make it our good. So Hashem says, you want to do good on your own? I'm going to help you out because that's what I really want. Okay. And we have a bunch more of Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, so about virtue and sin, and we shall look at that tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
And Rabbi,
12, what did I write this week in my email? Let me check. Hold on. Let me see what I wrote in the email this week.
I think you wrote 12:45, Rabbi.
Okay, well, I guess it's 12:45 again. Okay.
Wait,
So 12:45,
can't.
the Torah class. All the best, everyone. Have a
Is 12:45 the Torah class, Rabbi?
yes, 12:45. That's
Have
what I
a
wrote.
good
I
day.
can't seem to get to it, Rabbi.
It's
But
the same link as everything else is real. There's only one link now.
I can try.